What's going on, everybody? Tej back again with another video, and today we're doing yet another NFL mock draft, another 2-round mock at that. Hopefully you all enjoyed today's video. If you do, be sure to hit that like button. If you're new around here, want to see more mock drafts, hit that big red subscribe button, and off top, be sure to let me know what you think about, this year so far during the regular season, but also some of the prospects that have really stuck out over the last 2 weeks since my last mock draft. And who do I have going too high? Who do I have going too low? Do you like the fit for your favorite team? Who is your favorite team? Love to be able to talk about this mock draft down below with you in the comments section. Let's waste no more time and start jumping into things. Moving forward, I'll probably do 1-round, 2-round alternating mock drafts so we can spend more time about names rising and falling and then team fits. But today, 2 rounds, so I'll have to be relatively quick, and if you need to be sped up even more, be sure to bump me up in the playback options. You can take me to like 0.25 speed or something like that, 1.25 speed that is. But anyways, we start things off with quarterback, Bryce Young. Going to the Houston Texans. Look, Davis Mills has not done anything that's necessarily wanting you to start a franchise around him, so I think this makes a ton of sense. Nothing off the wall here. We're going to stick with the quarterback position with the Carolina Panthers. I mean, I think this is, the kind of situation Carolina's looking for. Now, granted, I am filming this right after their Thursday night win against Atlanta, so this order will change a little bit. But nonetheless, this team needs a franchise quarterback and the direction moving forward with that guy at the helm, especially if they are going to, turn down 2 firsts and a 2 ones and a second for, Brian Burns and a first-round pick for DJ Moore. All right, if you want to keep those pieces around, a quarterback is the quickest way to slingshot that rebuild. I'm actually going to stick at the quarterback position. I said in my last mock, Will Levis was coming off a tough game in Tennessee. Okay, I don't really like the idea of all 3 of those quarterbacks going 1, 2, 3, but at the time it was Carolina who was picking 3. But here for the Raiders, you can move on from Derek Carr after this year. Maybe it's just to change the head coach spot. I'm not even sure Josh McDaniels maintains his status as the head coach beyond this season, so he could be gone. Maybe they keep Carr, but I mean, I think you explore this, right? Like, there could be a world where you move on from Derek Carr, get an asset out of it, or you're just releasing him and saving a ton of money. That'll probably piss off Devontae Adams, but I think that's a relationship you could repair. And then Josh McDaniels gets his guy. Now, again, do you want him being the guy who's making a quarterback, selection at the top of the draft? I leave that to, the Davis family. But this would, moving up from Derek Carr, free up money to where they can try to fix up that offensive line and add another corner, which I think they desperately need on the outside. So this feels like logical. So I hate to have 3 quarterbacks, 1, 2, 3 again in back-to-back mocks, but I'll change that up for the next one. But I think it's worth having this conversation for the Raiders. Do you part ways with Derek Carr and try to use that money elsewhere? And maybe that's the quickest way, again, to use this term, slingshot your way into competition. Then, Pittsburgh kind of has, this dream scenario where maybe the best player of the draft falls to him and Will Anderson Jr. Now, I know Alex Highsmith's been solid this year. He's flashed moments of being a really solid pass rusher all, 3 years he's played in the league so far. But if you had the opportunity to pair up the best player in the draft, who is an edge rusher with TJ Watt, you jump on that. And then, Highsmith minimum, you got another year of him on a rookie contract where he's your nice, rotational third edge. And, kind of like how the Vikings will literally line up Zadarius Smith over the nose or over the center there at the nose tackle spot. There could be something you do that with, a TJ Watt. And they already kind of do that with a Cam Hayward. Maybe you can flex inside, an Alex Highsmith. I think there's ways to rotate all 3 on the field, and plus you have that interior pass rush with Cam Hayward. So the rich get richer here at the edge rushing spot, and you could also go this direction with Jalen Carter. Cam Hayward can't play forever, so that could be in play. But I think here for Detroit, you're going to wait for quarterback. We'll come back to that once we get to the second round. And then Jalen Carter, maybe the second best player in this draft. And speaking of a Tennessee game, coming off an awesome Tennessee showing last Saturday against the Vols, where, he to me, that was a safety in the end zone that he basically forced pretty early on. I think that was back in the first quarter against the Vols. But he's been a game wrecker. And, in the biggest stage this year, he was a huge reason why the Georgia defense looked as good, maybe even a smidge better than they were last year. So Jalen Carter's a freak. This team needs an interior, disruptor, and Jalen Carter can certainly be that. And then we get to the Philadelphia Eagles. They just traded for this, speed edge rusher and Robert Quinn. Why not go draft one of those types of guys as well? It's also, just kind of, Philadelphia team where it's like, what holes are there on the roster? Right? The last undefeated team in the league for a reason. A large part of that is because I think it's one of the most complete rosters in the NFL. So again, rich getting richer here, and it's positioned in a group that they covet, offensive and defensive line depth. And again, they just traded for a speed rusher. Why not go draft one and get one that's really cheap compared to what Robert Quinn is fetching right now, and probably will still command once he get to free agency. And then we get to the Arizona Cardinals. I'm going to go cornerback this time around. Keely Ringo, going back to that Tennessee game, he had that pick in the end zone and basically looked like he was running the route for Hendon Hooker, but this guy, 6'2", long arms, will run in the 4-3. I mean, checks every box you want, and a top 10 potential pick. And then you see that turnover production. You're starting to see the play pick up down the stretch. And again, that that Georgia defense against Tennessee looked as good as they did last year, which is a huge feather in the cap of people like Jalen Carter and N'Keal Ringo, considering how many players were drafted last year from Georgia's defense. And then we get to the 8th overall pick. I'm going back to the interior defensive line. As much as Jalen Carter's a freak, I think Bryan Bresee, once we get out of the combine, is going to be right there with him in a lot of people's eyes. And I could see some draft experts being like, I like him more. Kind of like it was cool last year to have, Kayvon Thibodeau ahead of Aiden Hutchinson, late in the cycle, or, Travon Walker, which obviously the Jags did. I can see Bryan Bresee kind of having that type of an argument where you're going against the norm, right? You're like, no, Bryan Bresee's the number one IDL, and you're just forcing people to have that conversation and think about it. I think there's going to be a conversation that deserves to be had, and plus that Jacksonville middle of the defense can certainly get a whole lot better, especially if Bresee hits the ground running as a pass rusher. He's then in the middle of a Travon Walker who can move her across the defensive line, and a Josh Allen who's played really well this year. Okay, next thing you know, that pass rush is looking really scary in Jacksonville. So then we get to the Chicago Bears. I'm actually going to stick on the defensive line here. And I'm going to go with Jared Verse. He's a little bit lower here on the Pro Football Network, who, again, this is their mock draft simulator that we're using. But this guy feels like top half the first round type of dude. He's just got that twitch right off the line of scrimmage, that quick burst. That first step is something that when NFL teams see it, you can't teach it. So let me go get the guy who already has that kind of built into his skill set, and Verse definitely does that. Playing really well, Power 5 school, ACC, a lot of things working in his favor. And coming into the season, also a transfer to Florida State. So, kind of a name that was on the bubble, and he certainly had the play to back it up, being a potential top 10 pick. And then we get to the Green Bay Packers. And man, I know they drafted Romeo Doubs, and they're excited about him, but he's hurt now. And you trade up and get an early second-round selection with Christian Watson. I know they're going to use that as, a reason to not go wide receiver, but have you seen this team? I mean, if you're picking the top 10 and you ignore it, then there's a major problem to be had there. So let's go Jordan Addison. And may not be a guy who does a whole lot after the catch, right? There was the speculation they were in on DJ Moore, offered a first-round pick for him, and I think Moore can do more yards after the catch stuff. But I look at this offense and not having somebody who can get open in that 10 to 20-yard range like they had with Devontae Adams. Jordan Addison could totally be that guy. Chris Wright runner, good hands. I can see that being a nice fit, a nice addition. And it doesn't take away from, Romeo Doubs as a deep route runner. And then, Christian Watson, this guy who is such a good athlete and so fast, you can use him in the end-around games, but he's also physical and has moments where great body control could be a vertical threat too. So I don't think his skill set takes away from those other two guys either. So then next up, Seattle Seahawks. I'm going to go with a little bit of a potential project here, but this is a Seattle team that's kind of exceeding our expectations, right? Let's go Nolan Smith. Obviously going to miss the rest of the year for this Georgia defense, and again, a unit that's been playing really, really well, but pre his injury, high-level run stopper. I could see that being something where NFL teams are like, awesome athlete, highly touted recruit. We're starting to see that turn into run production, kind of like a Travon Walker last year, or you go back even further, Rashawn Gary out of Michigan, where it's like the floor is already pretty high, and then you add on, high-end athletic traits. There could be, a gem to be sculpted there. So I think Nolan Smith will potentially be a project, but I still look at so much what he brings to the table, and it's hard to imagine him not being another one of those guys that goes top half the first round. That being said, this edge group is crazy, and there's names coming off in the second round that when I was, kind of writing up my draft and, kind of scripting this out, I was like, how are these guys second rounders? So I don't know. It's a loaded edge group. So if your team needs edge, this is a good draft class for your team and their respective needs. Sticking with the last name Smith, let's go Cam Smith here for the Detroit Lions. So you add a Jalen Carter, you add a Cam Smith. We're fixing up that defense, and again, we're going to come back to quarterback position later on. But Amani Oruwariye, a healthy scratch at points of this season. It just really has not been the same guy he was last year when he had 6 interceptions. Jeff Okudah, I think, made some nice progress, and that gives me encouragement, especially considering he basically missed his second year. He played one game, had the Achilles injury. So this is basically year 2. So to see him starting to pick up his play makes you feel that much better going into what realistically is kind of year 3 for him, but really year 4. And then adding a Cam Smith to be that number 2 corner, trying to repair that that secondary a little bit, and on top of course adding a Jalen Carter to pair up with an Aiden Hutchinson, some of the other talent they have potentially in the wings there across the offensive line. So then we get to the Houston Texans. We gave him the quarterback earlier. Let's go Quentin Johnston here. This team can certainly part ways with Brandon Cooks, and I think Quentin Johnston can certainly be that guy who gives you that downfield speed, plus he's 6'4", 220. Another big body type. You already have a Nico Collins, but Nico Collins don't move like Quentin Johnston, so starting to see him become a bigger and bigger part of the TCU offense. And, it's a Houston team that sure they can get better on the defensive side, but if they do move on from Brandon Cooks, look at the guys that Davis Mills is throwing to right now. You don't want your number 2 overall pick and CJ Stroud throw into those guys. Or, actually, for that matter, number 1 overall pick, Bryce Young, thinking back to my previous mocks. But you don't want your number 1 overall pick, Bryce Young, left out to dry, throw into, less than stellar, below average wide receivers and older guys. Let's go get a pairing that could potentially last the next decade, if it all goes well. Let me get to the Indianapolis Colts at 14. This is, such a square pick, but I love Terrence Johnson Jr., man. I really do think he ends up becoming tackle 1 off the board. I just look at a guy who's 6'6", 315 with great feet, and, first year playing a tackle, I think the ceiling is only going to be that much higher, and as he continues to play, he's going to get that much better. So you do have some inside-out versatility because he has played some guard for Ohio State, but I think this is a left tackle of the future. And, you look at Indianapolis and it's like, well, what are they doing? We can start there, but what are they doing at quarterback? But Matt Pryor, you still have Bernard Ryman. Maybe there's still hope. Maybe he turns it around in the second half of the season and this becomes, a position they're not really looking at. Maybe. But as of right now, it's a huge need. And if it's not going to be quarterback, which I don't really love the value here at 14, let's go get that bookend left tackle of the future. Next is the Atlanta Falcons. I'm going to go Brian Branch here. This is just one of those guys where I actually think they have him listed. They do as a safety. This is one of those guys that reads the game faster than it's actually being played at the college level, which is just one of those scary traits and ultimate versatility, right? He's played everywhere from outside corner to slot to both safeties positions. So a ton of different things Atlanta could use him for. Richie Grant, I think, is taking a step forward, been a little bit better this year versus his rookie season. So maybe Grant can be one of those 2 safeties, Branch can be the other, or he can just be your straight up nickel and kind of that playmaking type that has a nose for the football. You have one of those outside corners in AJ Terrell. Let's add some more investment in that secondary there with a guy like Brian Branch. Actually, sticking to the secondary, that's exactly what I'm going to do here for Washington. Thought about Antonio Johnson just because I do really like that fit, but let's go Joey Porter Jr., right? Like, Kendall Fuller's only getting that much older. Obviously, I already parted ways with William Jackson III. Benjamin St-Juste, I wouldn't, give up on him just yet. But think about that potential corner tandem, right? Like if St-Juste continues to get better, and then you add a Joey Porter Jr., who year over year at Penn State has gotten better and better, then you're talking about 2 6'2" plus size corners on the outside. And of course, I'm biased to that. That's the type of corner that I would want if I were a GM. Not every other team has, or GM for that matter, has that same vision in mind. But I think that type of length on the outside goes a long way. And, St-Juste is still, kind of a work in progress, but minimum, I think Joey Porter Jr., again, year over year, it's just gotten better. Great, genealogy, of course. His dad's a former NFL player. And I don't know, just one of those players who's just stood out this year at a, top tier program. So feel good about adding that type of piece to the secondary and, a defense that has some talent across the defensive line. Hopefully get Chase Young back. But still a unit that hasn't really lived up to expectations. Maybe they just need that true shutdown corner. And I think Joey Porter definitely has the traits and the potential to be that guy at the NFL level. And now we're going to get into a run of, lower position value type of guys because these guys are going to go in the first round. It's just hard to mock up where. But I do think Trenton Simpson to, a New England defense that, who is that inside linebacker of the future? I don't know. I don't think they have that guy. So, linebacker body with a safety skill set. Moving forward, this is kind of one of those guys who you add him into a Bill Belichick defense, and I just cannot wait to see what Bill Belichick does with this guy because he's the ultimate queen on the chessboard. You can do so many different things with him. He can move in so many different ways. And again, linebacker body, safety skill set, that in and of itself kind of displays what you could do with Trenton Simpson. So I love to see him playing for Bill Belichick. Then we get to the Cincinnati Bengals. I'm going to go Michael Mayer here, just adding one more weapon in the mix. Now, I know Hayden Hurst hasn't really been a problem, but again, Michael Mayer's going to be a first-round pick, so where's a logical landing spot? I think Cincinnati makes enough sense. And again, you're just adding that much more firepower. Plus, if you think, long-term, they're going to have to hand out a ton of money to Joe Burrow and Ja'Marr Chase. So is T. Higgins going to be a part of this team moving forward? How long can they hold on to Tyler Boyd? So I think adding one more asset right now as a pass catcher, one, makes that offense that much more loaded, but down the line where maybe you don't have a T. Higgins and a Tyler Boyd on the roster, you still have that other, main cog in the mix with a Michael Mayer at tight end who can obviously do a ton of different things from that point on. And then we get to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and I would really hate this pick for this team. But, Bijan Robinson, another guy who's going to go in the first round. He's this ultimate offensive playmaker at the backfield, out of the backfield. Best runner in the class, but also a dude who can straight up line up in the slot, play on the outside. I think against Kansas State last week, he had like 126 rushing yards in the first half. The dude's a freak, and there's no denying that. And you look at this Tampa Bay team and Byron Leftwich is talking about, it's not about rush yards, it's about rush attempts. That feels like rhetoric that could lead a team to drafting a running back in the first round. Again, considering they already drafted, or I guess they did draft Leonard Fournette, but, nonetheless, I think corner could certainly be something they look at here. Maybe further investment on the interior offensive line. What's the long-term plan at quarterback, right? Like, I think there's a ton of different avenues this team could go, but I could totally see Bijan Robinson being somebody they fall in love with and, kind of throw away, position value out of the equation to say, hey, Bijan can add a lot to this offense. We haven't been able to run the ball well. Maybe he makes a difference. So I would ask the Pittsburgh Steelers, how that's worked out drafting a first-round running back behind a bad offensive line. But that being said, I do think the Bucs will get healthier and better at that spot. So we'll have to wait and see. Anyways, let's move on to the Denver Broncos. I'm going to go Peter Skoronski here. Right tackle is kind of the last spot on that offensive line where I'm like, they can definitely get better there. So Peter Skoronski would have to make the flip from left tackle to right tackle, but he is a little undersized. So, kind of like Braden Smith, where it's like the arm length could be a concern. Maybe it is for Skoronski. We don't know yet. We'll have to wait and see. But that could make a logical flip where it's like, hey, just move him over to right tackle and those concerns get alleviated just a little bit. And, who knows? Maybe Garrett Bowles doesn't come back the same guy and you already have your, left tackle of the future kind of already in place. So the next up, we get to the LA Chargers and, Kayshon Boutte, up and down season so far, but dude, just adding that type of speed to this offense. This is what I've been talking about with the Chargers, right? You have, a guy who can win down the field in Mike Williams, but he wins in contested catches situations. Keenan Allen is not very fleet of foot. He's a crisp route runner and a great underneath tactician. Don't get me wrong, and very, very good hands, vice grips, if you want to call him that. But they're still missing that downfield burner that really takes, safeties, pushes them back down further down the field, opens up space for Mike Williams there and Keenan Allen underneath. So I think adding a Kayshon Boutte, and he can live in the slot, he can play outside, kind of based off what they want to do with Keenan Allen. I think that maybe is the piece they're missing to try to have Joe Lombardi open up the playbook, stretch the field, have Justin Herbert tap into that arm strike, flip the field that much more. So I think it's just a fit that makes a ton of sense. We'll have to wait and see if Boutte really develops into a first-round type of player. Then we get to the Tennessee Titans, another AFC South team where I'm going to go square here. I'm going to go Ola Fashanu. Been great this year at Penn State as a first-year starter, and, I actually just had the name escape me, but their left tackle has just really struggled in his role replacing Taylor Lewan. And again, Taylor Lewan makes sense as a cut candidate, a cap casualty. It'd save you about $6 million. And again, this is a Tennessee team that's, fighting against the cap. They're going to try to find any and all room they can muster up, right? This is the team that had to move on from A.J. Brown last offseason, had to part ways with Roger Saffold, who's been a big part of that offensive line for years. So, Taylor Lewan might be the next name that's kind of put on the cutting board, and Ola Fashanu, I think, could be a plug-and-play starter there at left tackle. So back to the Seattle Seahawks. Going to go with a little bit of a different direction here. And I'm not giving up on D. Eskridge, but this is more so like, let's talk about Josh Downs and the type of year he's had at UNC, because dude's playing his way into the first round. And, I fell in love with De'Ami Brown, and I was kind of like, okay, well, is Josh Downs be that same type of guy? It's really not, because De'Ami Brown did a ton on the outside. He's really a vertical, field-stretching wide receiver, where Josh Downs probably going to be a guy who lives in the slot. Now, granted, maybe he kicks outside to play wide, but when UNC uses him as a wide receiver, literally on the perimeter, he's more often than not just taking a step back and taking a screen. So I think he probably is a slot only at the next level, but maybe he develops into a Tyler Lockett replacement. And that's where I think some of the skill set could make nice, for a home potentially for Downs in Seattle, where, give it a couple years. I think he could develop into a Tyler Lockett-esque guy. He definitely has that speed to be a downfield weapon, but in the interim, play him in a slot and make him go tackle DK Metcalf on a slant and then try to catch up with Josh Downs on a bubble screen in the slot. That's the type of mindset I have with adding a Downs into this offense. And I think there's ways this defense can get better, but they're really impressed. They've kind of gelled together really well over the last 3 to 4 weeks. So let's add some more offensive firepower. Let's maintain this level of play for Geno Smith and get him a third weapon. So then we get to the Baltimore Ravens at 24, and a name that continues to rise, and maybe the best corner in college football right now, Devon Witherspoon. He's been balling and does it at a Power 5 conference at Illinois. He's just been great. And I complimented his coverage abilities last episode, but, or last mock draft, I should say, but also a guy who's a willing tackler, willing to make plays at the line of scrimmage. That kind of feels like a Baltimore Raven fit. And, Marcus Peters, kind of a gambler, and, coming off an injury, his PFF grades aren't great this year. So also in the last year of his contract, just makes sense for, a Baltimore team to let Peters walk, take that money, spend it elsewhere, ideally maybe on the offensive side, another wide receiver. Let's go draft a replacement in Devon Witherspoon. Next up is the New York Jets. And, I know this defense is already crazy, so, Rich getting richer again. But, Antonio Johnson, I think minimum plug-and-play slot corner. I already look at, DJ Reed and Sauce Gardner, who may not be the names you peg, but they've been the best corner tandem in the league this year. Let's go ahead and solidify that secondary with a nickel corner and Antonio Johnson. But I also see a potential fit where this guy could potentially be that box safety. Maybe you're rotating Jordan Whitehead back into that true deep free safety role. He has that flexibility. I think he could do something like that. Or, maybe Antonio Johnson kind of develops into that deep free safety. We'll have to wait and see. I think he's probably better suited as a nickel, strong safety type. And maybe you're, again, moving Whitehead back to that free safety over the top type of role. But nonetheless, this team could get a little bit better at one of those safety spots. Antonio Johnson, minimum, nice nickel. But I also think he could help out in that safety hole and just make that defense that much scarier to face. Next up is the Dallas Cowboys, and they feel like they've been looking for this type of dude for a while, but let's just give them a true space eater there in the middle. 350-pound Siaki Ika. They're the plug the middle of the defense, and think about how much cleaner that keeps, if they keep Leighton Vander Esch around, obviously on a one-year deal, so we'll have to wait and see there, but, or if they're playing Parsons at the off-ball spot, like Siaki Ika keeps the middle of that field that much more clean and allows you to kind of rotate Parsons down and have him be somebody who tees off against guards as a blitzing off-ball linebacker, or just puts his hand in the dirt and plays edge, because we know how good he is at that. So I just think this is the type of guy that they've been looking for a while, and also the pass rush upside's there too. So go ahead and, again, rich kid richer here, and it's the defense that's utilizing a lot of stunt and twists and generating a high pass rush rate. Siaki Ika this year really taking a step forward as a pass rusher, so look out opposing quarterbacks. Next up, we get to the New York Giants. I'm actually going to stick on the defensive side of the ball here. Last time I went Hendon Hooker here. Just Noah Sewell's a fantastic fit for that Wink Martindale defense. And yeah, I know they need wide receiver. We're going to come back to that. They definitely need to get better on the outside, and they're still looking there for their franchise quarterback. So I am ignoring some big offensive needs for sure. But again, Noah Sewell is exactly what Wink Martindale wanted, a linebacker. And, his play's been a little bit better the last couple of weeks. I think it was 2 mocks ago I said, right now he's on first rounder. The last 2, 3, 4 weeks, he's really kind of picked it up and kind of getting back to where our expectations were for Noah Sewell. And dude is a freak athlete and an awesome pass rusher from the middle. So Wink Martindale, I think, would be making any and all arguments he can to add that dude to the middle of his defense. Next up, Kansas City Chiefs. We're going to actually go edge here. I don't necessarily know how great of a fit he typically, base 4-3, but you see the Chiefs more often than not running, 4-man fronts, more often than not living in nickel, if we're being honest with ourselves. That's the typical base of the NFL more often than not nowadays. But Tyree Wilson, I'm not entirely sure how he'd look with a hand in the dirt type of 4-3 edge, but maybe he could stand up and, when they get in those nickel sets, I think he's better suited for a base 3-4, but again, base defenses more often than not nowadays are nickel defenses, but long arms and kind of a project, but I look at him and I'm like, if you keep Carlos Dunlap around this huge body, that could be a nice mentor-mentee relationship that could be carved out there. Again, that's assuming they even bring back Carlos Dunlap. No guarantee by any stretch, but let's continue to get better there on the edge. That's really the point I'm trying to hammer home here. Is like, you drafted George Karlaftis, but you could also go speed, edge rusher here, BJ Ojulari, Felix Ndike-Uzama, or someone of that ilk, where you have that high motor, physical, violent hands with George Karlaftis on one side and then the speed on the other end, and you can flip them around based off of what opposing tackles struggle with. But here, let's just go with pure upside. Let's go Tyree Wilson with 6'6", almost 300 pounds, super long arms. There's a lot to work with there. And, one of those guys where if he hits his full potential, we're going to look back and be like, that guy went 28? That'd be crazy. So I think in this situation, BPA, best potential available also. Could certainly be, the calling card here for Wilson going to the Chiefs. Then we get to the Minnesota Vikings, and, we'll see. I think Odell Beckham Jr. could be a sneaky good fit, but let's just say they add a JSN, right? And, we're still waiting to see the answer. Can he play on the outside primarily this year when we haven't gotten to see him for Ohio State? He's been living out of the slot. Now let's just say that is his role moving forward. Now, granted, this is already a team that drafted a slot wide receiver in college. That made a pretty fantastic transition to playing on the outside with Justin Jefferson. Let's just say JSN minimum is that slot. Sure, that means you're leaving Thielen on the outside. Not ideal. I'd rather see him kick inside as he gets older and maybe loses a step. But that being said, that 3-headed monster, and they win in different ways, right? Like JSN is not this all-world athlete, kind of like an Adam Thielen, but great football IQ, enough route running ability, and just finds that open spot on the defense. And he's very QB friendly, right? Go get the football. He does those little things that not leaving his QB out to dry, which Kirk Cousins will certainly appreciate. And then, of course, Justin Jefferson is the head honcho of the group, the guy who can win intermediate, but also deep down the field. I just think adding that third weapon to the mix. And when they added and traded for TJ Hawkinson, I was like, I wonder if they make a move for a wide receiver. Again, I think OBJ could certainly be in the cards here, but JSN, if they miss out, could be a nice, that third option and potential Adam Thielen replacement for the future. Then we get to the Buffalo Bills, and again, I don't know if this is a perfect fit. I think I've done this in previous mocks, but Roger Saffold has not played really all that great this year at left guard, so that investment I liked it in theory, but has not panned out. O'Cyrus Torrence is, without a doubt, in my opinion, IOL 1 right now. Done a fantastic job since transferring from Louisiana to Lafayette, coming with Billy Napier, and he's played great football at Florida. So exactly the kind of transition we wanted to see. He was one of my honorable mentions for the IOL group back when I did that position ranking. And, the questions I had, he's answered in a great way. So, kind of the head of the group there, and I think plug and play left guard replacement. Now, zone versus power scheme. We'll have to, wait and see. Maybe the Bills want to change something up or something like that. I don't know if it's the best scheme fit, but in theory, name on paper, I think this could be a nice left guard of the future. And then we get to the Philadelphia Eagles, and, this is a spot where I've been hammering home Bijan Robinson, but he's already off the board. Let's do something a little different here. And let's go Clark Phillips. In this defense where you're playing a lot of zone, right? And you already have a playmaker on like Darius Slay on one side. Clark Phillips just has that energy and that vibe to him where it's just like, I can create 4 turnovers in 2 weeks like he did earlier this season for the Utes. So also James Bradbury on a 1-year contract. Maybe they just straight up let him walk. Clark Phillips could step into a starting role there at 31. I think that's a good place to take him. I think it's solid value for Clark Phillips too. Or it could be a spot where like they bring back James Bradbury because, he wants to win a ring and he thinks Philadelphia can do that. And then Clark Phillips is just that young corner who gets to sit behind a Darius Slay and a James Bradbury in that defense and then eventually becomes a starter. Yeah, I'm all about that for his potential future because I think that just put him in that type of environment, let him learn, and then when he hits the field, that dude's going to be making plays left, right, and center. Anyways, let's move on to the second round. Now, we're going to have a little bit of a run on edge rushers here. Let's go Isaiah Foskey again. I think this is a Houston defense that's trying to get better. We went quarterback, we went wide receiver in the first round. Now let's address that edge, and let's address that defense in general. And let's get him an edge rusher. Jerry Hughes can't play forever, and he's been carrying the load there. So let's go find a potential replacement and a better upgrade there long term. And then sticking at the edge, again, we're going to go Andre Carter, the second to the Carolina Panthers. And I think he could be what Yetur Gross-Matos hasn't developed into. And, again, going back to what I was talking about earlier, having edge rushers of different skill sets, Brian Burns is the ultimate bend and speed rusher. I love big Brian Burns fan. That being said, 2 1s in a second. Should have taken that trade, Carolina. But then Andre Carter could be the, this dude's a freak athlete. He's super explosive, especially running through tackles, but he wins with power right in his hands, and he'll just move a tackle back into a QB's lap. So I think that nice complement, speed versus power, that allows the Carolina defense moving forward to be able to, put those guys in the best situation moving forward. Hey, that tackle struggles against, speed edge rushers. Okay, we'll have Brian Burns line up in front of him. Or that guy really, not the strongest tackler. He struggles with guys who win with strength. Okay, cool. We'll put Andre Carter the second over him. It kind of lets you play that mismatch game. And then we get to the Pittsburgh Steelers, and this feels like a stretch here, but if Broderick Jones fell to the second round, again, one of those names where it's like, how is this guy available? So a lot to be figured out here once we get into the NFL draft. And also, advantage to teams like Pittsburgh with 2 second-round picks. There's only 31 first-round picks. Now, it's only a difference of 1, but that's one more player who would have gone to the first round that's falling and matriculating into the second round. So a little bit of a, maybe this is a reason why Broderick Jones could make it to the second round in the world we live in. But Pittsburgh needs a left tackle. And even if you are a believer in Dan Moore, maybe you could flip him over to right tackle and he's a long-term Chukwuma Okorafor replacement. Or, Chukwuma Okorafor, as much as I have given him grief, his PFF grades year over year have gotten better and better. I think that's kind of a product of the offense. I digress. Minimum Dan Moore then becomes, maybe a decent swing tackle, but he's just not it right now at left tackle. So you got to go address that position. Broderick Jones has been awesome this year for Georgia. Feels like a first-round pick. So if Pittsburgh got him at 34, you'd be counting your blessings. And, Najee Harris, I'm sure, would have a huge smile on his face, as would Kenny Pickett. So then we get to the Detroit Lions, and as promised, we're going to give him a quarterback here, Hendon Hooker. He's going to be 25 when he gets drafted, so it's going to be really interesting to see how that age component factors into his draft stock. Like why, we saw moments throughout his career, even going back to when he was with Virginia Tech, we saw flashes. But this year at Tennessee and, Josh Heupel offense that's very QB friendly, we've kind of seen it all kind of come together and we've seen more consistency out of him. So he's definitely earned his way into being a potential top 50 pick. And to me, more than likely a top 50 pick. And for Detroit, it's a spot where, hey, we went defense twice in the first round and got 2 of the best players at their respective positions, Jalen Carter and Cam Smith. Now we just have Hendon Hooker fall into our lap. We can get cheaper quarterbacks, spend that money elsewhere that we're not spending now in Jared Goff. And, Hendon Hooker, even with, potential flaws you may see in his game, I think what we've seen this year at Tennessee is he can minimum be, a facilitator. He can get the ball out to playmakers, and that's going to be a Detroit team where, DJ Chark's going to be gone, but you still have Amon-Ra St. Brown, you still have DeAndre Swift, you still have, Jameson Williams, who we haven't gotten to see play yet this year. he's going to have players where it's like, hey, Hendon Hooker, just spread the ball around, make throws. Ben Johnson's done a good job as an OC for the most part, getting people open and trying new things. We'll make sure people have separation, make sure people are getting open, just hit the throws. I can see that world for Detroit. And, this is one of the best case scenarios. Again, two freak defensive players, one of the best players at their respective positions, IDL and corner. And then you still end up with a quarterback who maybe is that guy moving forward. So one of the best case scenarios, in my opinion, for Detroit moving forward. Then we get to the Vegas Raiders once more. Let me just refresh myself. What did we do in the first round? Oh, that's right. We went Will Levis, of course. How did I forget? They're at number 3 overall. Now we're going to have to address that defense because they've got to get better. And, offensive line, totally in play here. But I want to give a shout out to Christian Gonzalez. I was actually watching that Oregon game last weekend against Colorado, and, lopsided matchup for sure. Bo Nix has another, 5-tutty performance. But Christian Gonzalez, when he sits and plays back in zone, that dude can read a quarterback's eyes as good as anybody in this class. And I say that, accounting for names we've already taken off the board, like a Cam Smith, like a Keely Ringo. Like, this dude can plant his back foot, drive on a football, and create some big plays. So I'd love to see, what does Patrick Graham want to do moving forward? He's a guy in New York where he never relied on one type of they weren't a cover 3 defense. They weren't a too high, cover 4 defense. They didn't stick him man-to-man. He mixes a ton of different coverages. So I'd love to see how Christian Gonzalez can maybe handle that challenge and what type of playmaker he could potentially be. But minimum, the Raiders have got to get another outside corner. They got to get better there on the perimeter. I think Christian Gonzalez makes sense there as a fit. Then we get to the Arizona Cardinals, and one of these edge rushers where, like, dude, if he falls the second round, sprint the card in. And in this world, we've given him Keely Ringo in the first round and now Felix Ndike-Uzama. And even Ndike-Uzama paired up with, Cam Thomas or Amaje Sanders, where I don't think either one of those guys necessarily wins with speed or bend. And that's exactly what Felix Ndike-Uzama wins with. So, again, complimenting edge rushers, trying to take advantage of mismatches against, opposing tackles when that time comes. But just looking at this Arizona defense, you add a potential number 1 corner, you add a potential 8 to 10 plus sack a year type of guy in Ndike-Uzama. That's how you fix that defense. That's how this team, I think, gets to that next level. Now, you still got to figure out what, Cliff Kingsbury, that whole situation. What's the offense going to be? But that defense definitely needs some, additional talent. I think Vance Joseph's been doing a lot with little for too long. Then we get to the Jacksonville Jaguars. And I'm going to go Jordan Battle here. I think Rashawn Jenkins was one of those signings where, like, it's like, okay, I don't know what Urban Meyer's doing here. And, clearly we saw how that played out. But it was just like, okay, they handed a ton of money to Shaq Griffin and Rashawn Jenkins. At least Shaq Griffin's like, yeah, he's an outside corner. That makes some sense. But, Tyson Campbell's really stepped up, and I think maybe they want to get younger at that other corner spot. So definitely keep your eye on Shaq Griffin. Could make sense as a cut candidate, but so does Rashawn Jenkins. And let's say in this world, Jordan Battle, who I think could play that, split safety role, but maybe because of a lack of athleticism, he's better suited as a box safety and a guy who, in zone coverage, where I think he is really instinctual. Instead of him being a deep free safety, he's more of that, strong safety rotating down and, defending that first down marker. I think that could be a role where he has a ton of success. And then pair him up with Andre Sisco, who is the ultimate, ball hog, speed. Hasn't always been perfect, but if the best of Andre Sisco came to the table, that dude as a true deep free safety could be insane. And I think that's just a nice safety tandem. I'd love to see how it played out. So maybe it's just my curiosity making this pick, but I'd love to see those two as the safeties moving forward for Jacksonville. Then we get to the Pittsburgh Steelers, and we've already gone, tackle here in the second round, and we could even go back and refresh my memory what Pittsburgh did in the first round. Oh, that's right, maybe the best player in the draft class, and Will Anderson. So we've gotten them another edge to pair up with TJ Watt. We've addressed left tackle, which I think is probably the biggest need on this team. And if it's not tackle, it's corner. And Eli Ricks is starting to see the field now for Alabama. And actually, if you look at the PFF grades, coming off a couple nice games. And it's a Pittsburgh team that runs a lot of zone. I'd love to see Eli Ricks find himself in, a man press type of defense, maybe in Carolina or something like that. I think that's what I did in my last mock. But Pittsburgh's just got to get more talent. And now that we're starting to see Ricks on the field, we're starting to see that talent come to fruition. He was a preseason top 2 corner in my, preseason cornerback rankings. So I think the talent's there. Now it just comes down to obviously learning the playbook, getting on the field, and getting to see it actually come to fruition. The next up is the Green Bay Packers, and I don't know if they do this. We already went, Jordan Addison in the first round, but could they double up at pass catcher? Could they look at this situation and say, hey, Aaron, we screwed you over. We have got to fix this. Then they go Darnell Washington, this way more athletic type than Robert Tonyan, but can also be a factor as a blocker to just move tight end. I think it could make sense. It comes down to, will Brian Gutekunst do it? If we're being honest with ourselves, the answer is probably no, especially considering, Rashawn Gary just tore his ACL. This team needs a third edge rusher. I thought about that. They could try to get younger on the interior defensive line. Plenty of different avenues. They could add some, offensive line depth for sure. But I could see a world where it's like, hey, Aaron, please stick around for one more year. We're going to do you right this time. We're going to take a wide receiver in the top 10. We're going to go double down pass catcher, Darnell Washington in the second round. Please stay. Please be happy. Maybe, but doesn't feel all that likely. Then we get to the New Orleans Saints next. I'm actually going to have a little bit of a run on interior offensive line through the next 4 picks are going to be IOL guys, but Andrew Voorhees, and then the next pick is going to be Connor Beebe, and I'll break it down why I split it up this way. Voorhees versus Beebe, again, relying on PFF grades here. Voorhees this year been a little bit better of a run blocker versus Beebe, who's really stood out. In pass protection, maybe lagged a little bit behind in run blocking. So I just saw the Rams, the team that's they're going to run the football too. But we think about that Sean McVay pass game. So Connor Beebe kind of makes sense. Plug and play left guard where they definitely need to get better there on the interior. And then Andrew Voorhees, I think this is just both these guys play tackle at their respective schools, by the way, USC and K-State. But I think both of them probably project a little bit better there at guard. And whether it's Cesar Ruiz replacement, Andres Pete, who I think makes a ton of money and really isn't always worth it. Voorhees could make for a logical replacement there. And for a team that's going to be potentially figuring out this cap situation, moving on from Andres Pete, I think makes a ton of sense, and trying to free up that cap space. So Voorhees makes sense as a logical replacement. Then we get to the Browns. Let's go interior defensive line here. Let's go Gervon Dexter. Another one of those teams, kind of like Dallas earlier when we were talking about Siaki Ika. They've just been looking for this dude for a while now, where they just need this space eater. And Dexter has some pass rush upside. You see some of the moves. Not entirely sold on if he'll enter the draft this year. Could potentially go back to Florida, but let's just say in this world he does commit. A team's going to fall in love with that potential, and he's also just a massive human being. So minimum eating space, clogging up the middle of the defense, and trying to slow down opposing run games. And as good as the Browns are running the game, running the ball themselves, you would think that's something they kind of factor in their game plan defensively. But it's one of the weaker IDL groups, and I think Gervon Dexter could be a step in the right direction for him. And then again, as promised, we're going to go back to the interior offensive line for the Seattle Seahawks. I'm actually going to go center. John Michael Schmitz here. But fifth-year player at Minnesota, I think he has potential to play either guard spot. So whether it's Austin Blythe replacement there at center, or it's either of the two guard positions, I think John Michael Schmitz could be a plug-and-play starter there in one of the weaker spots on the roster. This Seattle team all of a sudden doesn't feel like they have a ton of glaring needs. Places where they can get better for sure, but nothing that you're like, man, Seattle has gotta fix that. Like, that is a major issue. Like, coming to the season, I was like, edge, corner, interior offensive line, quarterback. But obviously a ton has changed. They're 6-3, and I kind of like them as a money line play this week against the Bucs in Germany. So they may well be 7-3 at the end of this week. So now you look at that roster, and it's like, okay, not as bad as we once thought. So let's go ahead and add one more interior offensive line piece. Maybe try to fix up and solidify that offensive line. We've already added another wide receiver. Let's keep Geno Smith looking this good. So then we get to the Indianapolis Colts, and this team has been looking for edge rush help, but they still are. Let's go BJ Ojulari, who maybe there's a little bit of overlap there with Kwity Paye, who's this freak athlete with an insane 3-cone, super bendy. Maybe there's a little bit of overlap as much as I've talked about complementary skill sets. So maybe Zach Harrison makes a little bit more sense. Maybe. But, even when you look at Kwity Paye's PFF grades, a lot of the reason for his high overall grade is his run defense, and not because of his pass rush. So again, we find ourselves in another offseason where we're asking the Indianapolis Colts, what are you doing at quarterback and what are you doing at edge? How many times can we sing this song? So hopefully they keep pouring investments into that. We went tackle in the first round. Now let's go edge. This team is known for their trenches, and then some of those other non-valuable positions like off-ball linebacker and Shaq Leonard, who is a freak. Don't get me wrong, but I think this team needs to get better at those highly, game-changing, highly valuable positions like edge. So take a flyer on BJ Ojulari, second-round pick. I think that's a good value for him. Then we get back to the Washington Commanders. I'm actually going to go safety here. So we're doubling down on the investment on the defensive side. We went Joey Porter Jr. in the first round, potential CB1 of the future. Now let's go Brandon Joseph, who I think could be the deep free safety, and then Cameron Curl can kind of just live and thrive in that box safety role where he's been really, really good. He's been one of the better pieces of that Washington defense. So rounding out that side of the ball. Now, granted, this is a Washington offense that they can get better on the offensive line. I think they need to figure out that quarterback position moving forward, for sure. But nonetheless, let's actually make that defensive strength. Let's address those last few needs, and maybe they can win enough games behind that and their run game to become, a solid team. And, we'll figure out what that quarterback position is. It feels like a team that's probably going to want a veteran one way or another. But granted, they've been doing that for a while, so we'll have to wait and see. Then we get to the Falcons at 47, and, Zach Harrison, I want to keep giving him credit. This is a guy who's playing really well for Ohio State. We're starting to see a little bit more, the ankle flexion. We're starting to get a little bit more bend in his game. But I think he's actually going to have, if you look at only 40, people are going to look at him and be like, that size and that 40, that guy's a freak athlete. The bend is still a little bit of a concern, but it feels like it's getting better there. And going back to my complementary skill sets at the edge position, speed, finesse rusher in Arnold Ebiketie versus a guy who's big, fast, and can turn that speed into power with Zach Harrison. Again, feels like a nice compliment. And, as much as I do like Arnold Ebiketie, and I'm intrigued to see what D'Angelo Malone becomes, it's a team that can get better as a pass rushing unit. So, need to continue to pour assets into the edge. And it's back-to-back years now where you get an edge in the second round. Maybe that's kind of the move moving forward. And again, this is a great edge class. So, Zach Harrison, middle of the second round, I think that's a good value there for Atlanta. Back to the Cincinnati Bengals. Let's just go ahead and add some cornerback depth. Tyreek Stevenson, 6 foot, 200 plus pounds, kind of has the making of an NFL corner. Had some spotty games for Miami, but for the most part, been pretty solid this year for the Canes. And, it's a team that just had Chidobe Awuzie, who's been an awesome free agency addition from 2 off seasons ago. He's now out for the rest of the year. Eli Apple's not somebody they're going to keep around long term. Cam Taylor-Britt's having to learn some lessons right now, but ideally maybe he takes those rookie mistakes, becomes that much better in year 2. Pair up with Tyreek Stevenson, and even if he's just that third kind of rotational corner, kind of like what the Browns had for a little bit of Greg Newsome's rookie year, I think it's a great advantageous spot, similar to what I was talking about earlier with Clark Phillips. Let this young corner, where it's a position where it typically takes 2 to 3 years for CBs to really hit their stride. Not everybody turns into a Sauce Gardner type or a JC Horn type from a couple years back. Pat Surtain, another good example of that. But for the most part, corners take some time, and this could be a situation where Stevenson can find that balance of seeing the field, getting some playing time, but then also learning behind some players like Chidobe Awuzie, who again has been fantastic in Cincinnati. Back to the New England Patriots, all the rumors around Isaiah Wynn, they're going to move on from. It does feel like tackles potentially in the future, and it's just a unit where it feels like Bill Belichick is always trying to draft and add some depth there. Michael Onwenu is how I thought it was. Onwenu is what I heard from the Ian Eagle call. So let me know if you know for sure how to say that. Onwenu, whatever it is. 6th round pick, late selection, becomes the starter. This is just a position group that Bill Belichick likes to continuously add at. And I could see where it's like, hey, we're not going to re-sign Isaiah Wynn, so we have a needed tackle. I think Anton Harrison, whatever team gets him in the middle of the second, is going to be so happy. I'm a big Anton Harrison guy, and I think maybe the one weakness in his profile is not being the strongest dude. But I think once you go from the college to the NFL level, I think that weakness gets improved upon exponentially, just because you're going from college to a professional, strength and conditioning environment. So I think he's going to get rid of that one weakness. And he's already played a ton of snaps, long time starter at Oklahoma, has seen a ton of pass rush sets, and pass blocking sets. So he's experienced. I think he can be a plug and play guy at the NFL level. Then we get back to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We went running back in the first round, not a super high position value, but I look at the 2 corners they have hitting the market, Sean Murphy-Bunting, Jamel Dean. I think Jamel Dean's the guy you bring back, and therefore there's a bit of an opening there at slot corner, depending on what they want to do with Antoine Winfield. I'd be interested to see maybe they want to go safety here and have Winfield Jr. play that nickel role. That'd be insane. But let's just say they go Chris Abrams-Draine, who I want to give a ton of credit here. He was on my quarterback honorable mentions. I thought he might end up being just a nickel-only guy. This year at Missouri, he has played on the outside, and not only played really well on the outside. So I think there was some versatility there. Maybe he could be able to stick at the outside at the NFL level, but minimum, I think you shift this guy back in the inside, and you're moving on without skipping a beat, replacing Sean Murphy-Bunting and potentially saving money, because that's a young corner hitting the free agency market. He's going to fetch a pretty big contract just because young corner who's won a Super Bowl, right? He's going to make a lot of money. So get cheaper at that position. Go Chris Abrams-Draine, and you have him on a rookie contract, obviously, for 4 years. Back to the Carolina Panthers at pick number 51. I'm going to go wide receiver here. And another one of those guys where, with a year gone by, his role has changed a little bit, and that's Terrace Marshall Jr. Actually, I thought, in his rookie year, we didn't get to see a whole lot of him, and it kind of disappointed a lot of people, but he was living out of the slot. Now this year, he shifted out to playing out wide, and him and DJ Moore, I think, could make for that outside corner pairing of the future. And Parker Washington, minimum, really nice yak weapon, and a guy I think minimum solid NFL slot wide receiver, a guy who can play for 6 to 8 years, and we're like, yep, that guy, if he's your third wide receiver, you can win a fair amount of games. But I do think, that body control and ability to win the catch points, similar to what Jahan Dotson had at Penn State. I'm not just helmet scouting here. There are similar skill set overlap there, genuinely. So there might be more than just a slot wide receiver to be developed there in Carolina. And minimum, if he proves to be a guy who can play on the outside, cool. Terrace Marshall Jr. just slots back into the slot. So no pun intended there. But I think it's just, whatever this quarterback of the future is going to be in this situation, we had Stroud go to, get him a weapon, and let's make a nice trio for Stroud to be able to work with. Back to the Tennessee Titans, though. Let's go Leighton Robinson here. And, I'm not necessarily making this my final, comp for Robinson, but he kind of gives me Roger Saffold vibes where, again, moving forward just as an offensive lineman, run blocking, getting his feet moving ahead, dude's an animal and it's super strong. Again, gives me a lot of Roger Saffold kind of vibes. Struggles a little bit in pass protection, but I think with some time that can be ironed out. And, I look at the left guard spot. Brewer is just not really, Aaron Brewer, that is, it's just not been great. And, it's the Titans now going tackle and left guard. I know that's super boring, and Titans fans are going to be like, hey, what about wide receiver? What about, edge? What about corner? I get it, but based off the identity of this team, if you were to add, Olu Fashanu and Layden Robinson, Derrick Henry, looking at the left side of that offensive line, is going to have a grin from ear to ear. So that's kind of my rationale there, though I do recognize plenty of other holes the Titans could address here in the first 2 rounds of the draft. Then we get to the LA Chargers. You could go, big body IDL here. We went wide receiver in the first round. And I'm actually going to go offensive line. And we're going to have a little bit of run on tackles here. And some names that I haven't really gotten a chance to talk about. DeJuan Jones, give him a ton of credit, has played really well this year for Ohio State. And, I think part of the reason I'm intrigued by this fit versus the name I'm going to have go at 54 is he already plays right tackle. So this is your guy. Rashawn Slater comes back healthy. He's your left tackle. DeJuan Jones doesn't even have to have a position flip. Plug and play right tackle, solidify that offensive line, finish the work you started 2 off seasons ago, and keep Justin Herbert upright. We already added a wide receiver. Now it feels like that offense is ready to roll. We got 3 wide receivers, and including that speed guy. Now the offensive line is set when they're all healthy. This offense can really kind of kick it into gear. So then next up, as promised, going to be another offensive lineman. I'm actually going to go Jalen Duncan, a guy who was one of my honorable mentions for my offensive tackle position rankings coming into the season. And he needed a position flip here going to the right side, but Greg Littles's just not been it. And similar to the Chargers, Miami has 1 spot on the offensive line. We were like, they definitely can get better there. They need to improve that unit. And right now it's right tackle, which ironically enough is Tua's blind side. So let's draft to Jalen Duncan. I'll be interested to see what his stock kind of finishes at. Second round, maybe a little rich in my opinion, but I also know people who think he belongs in the first round. So he's kind of one of those prospects that can go either way. And we're still so early on. We're only halfway through the NFL season, a little bit more than halfway through the college season. We haven't even gotten to the combine, so we'll have to wait and see. But Duncan could be a name you see here in the mid-second rounds. And, I like that addition for Miami offense that really, you fix that right tackle spot and not a lot of holes to look at and take notice of for Miami. Back to the Seattle Seahawks, very active here in this mock draft. And, kind of how we've been, IOL, wide receiver, these little places where they can definitely get better. There's one area where they can certainly get better, and that is defensive line. Let's go Jaquelin Roy, a guy who this year at LSU has been a high-level run stopper, been a high-level pass rusher. Maybe the pass rush taking a little bit of a step down versus last year, but I still think he's one of those guys who could potentially do both at the NFL level. And look at Seattle's roster. Who's that guy for the next 3 to 5 years? Because they got Shelby Harris in that Russell Wilson deal. Wrong side of 30. They're going to need that guy long term. I think Jaquelin Roy, middle to back end of the second round, that's good value and a worthwhile investment for a freak athlete with a highly touted recruiting profile coming into college. The next up, the New York Jets, and a little bit of a different name here that I haven't talked about in these mock drafts. Let's go Owen Pappoe, freak athlete. He's had up and down games here at Auburn, so there's a lot of things kind of swirling around that football program right now. Not a very good year for Auburn all in all. Of course, having to fire your coach midseason kind of reflective of that, but I think Owen Pappoe, once you get him to the NFL level, a little small, 6'1", 225, but kind of looks like a modern-day linebacker where you're not as worried about, height. This dude could move. And I look at his potential athleticism and adding him into a coverage specialist role for Robert Saleh. I focus so much on the defense here for a Jets team that could use another tackle. I definitely thought about that here at 56. Is Zach Wilson the guy moving forward? Could they add another wide receiver if they do part ways with Elijah Moore? Plenty of different routes you can go with here, but I just assume in this mock draft, take that defense to a whole other level. It's already been great. Let's take it into elite stratosphere type of territory, and then we'll have to wait and see if Zach Wilson proves to be the guy, and then hopefully the offensive line gets healthy, and then we're not looking at that side of the ball and such concern or maybe potentially disdain, depending on how you feel about Wilson and the O-line moving forward. So I think Pappoe, I know the defense is already really good, but he could be that missing piece there in the middle of it as that, Fred Warner. I'm not saying he's going to be Fred Warner, but he could be that type of guy or play that type of role for Robert Saleh. Then we get to the Chicago Bears at 57. I'm actually going to stick at linebacker. Let's go to DeMarvin Overshown. They just traded away, Roquan Smith, so obviously inside linebacker is a big position that they're looking to fill. And DeMarvin Overshown, as much as I have sung his praise, he was actually my number 5 linebacker in the preseason rankings for that position group. Now he's got 11 missed tackles in the season, 6 coming in the last 2 weeks. So the first, handful of weeks of the season, I was singing his praises. He had high PFF grades and an awesome NFL, body type, 6'4", near 250 pounds. Looks like an NFL linebacker. But now with the missed tackle percentage starting to creep up, and he's starting to fall back on that weakness that he had in years past. So I am concerned he might be backsliding a little bit. But if you were to figure it out, maybe it's just a 2-week, bump in the road in the middle of the season. if he cleans it up, I think this guy deserves to be in that, first to second day conversation. Probably not, I don't like him as much as I like, a Noah Sewell or, even a Jack Campbell for that matter, or obviously a Trenton Simpson. Trenton Simpson and Sewell definitely feel like the first round contenders. But, day two, I think DeMarvin Overshown should certainly be in that conversation. Then we get to the Giants. Speaking of linebacker, we went with Noah Sewell in the first round for the Giants. And now we have a little bit of a run on Tennessee players. So, sorry, I didn't break this all up all that well. But let's go Cedric Tillman. Maybe Tillman could be the Kenny Golladay this team didn't end up getting from Kenny Golladay, right? I don't think he has the most insane downfield speed. But, 6'3" could be that possession guy moving forward. And then we get to the Dallas Cowboys. Now, another team that's reportedly very interested in OBJ, but let's say they swing and miss. He goes to Buffalo or he goes to Minnesota, whatever. Jalen Hyatt. I mean, this guy has been awesome this year for Tennessee. So back-to-back Tennessee wide receivers here. Different skill sets. And that's part of why that Tennessee offense has been good, because they have nice complementary skill sets. Tillman's kind of the big body guy. Maybe could be the possession moving forward for the Giants. And then sticking in the NFC East, Hyatt could be that speed burner. We know they were interested in Brandon Cooks. Hyatt, I think, could fill that type of role. And then for the Kansas City Chiefs, let's go Darnell Wright, who, look at his PFF grade, especially as a pass blocker or pass protector. He's been really nice this year for Tennessee. And they're going to have to make the decision. Do we want to pay an Orlando Brown? And even if they do, Andrew Wiley is not good. Like, Andrew Wiley has really struggled there at right tackle, which is disappointing considering how long he's been in the league and he's a veteran. I'm sure Kansas City saw that as like, yeah, he's not great, but he's a veteran. He'll hold his own, and he has not. So, minimum, Darnell Wright could be, a contender for that right tackle spot. Also have Lucas Niang kind of lingering. Maybe he takes a step forward next season as well. 3 more picks to go. Back to the Detroit Lions. So, refreshing my memory here, obviously we went Jalen Carter, then we went Cam Smith, and then we went Hendon Hooker at the top of the second round. So, they've been very active. Let's just say here they find that guy who, stick at the linebacker position. Another guy comes off the board here, Jack Campbell. Could be that nice compliment to Malcolm Rodriguez, who a little bit smaller, but awesome athlete and can do a ton of different things, can work sideline to sideline. Let's let Jack Campbell be the guy who focuses in the middle of the field. Have him have a funnel basically right to the quarterback, and run game that comes up the middle, that's all Jack Campbell. And then potentially using him as a blitzer as well. He's been okay in coverage for Iowa this year. I do worry about his athletic limitations. He's not a horrible athlete, but he's not an all-world guy. He's not a Noah Sewell. He's not a Trenton Simpson. So, how does that coverage that he's had and he's had as a strength for the most part at Iowa, how does that translate to the NFL level? So that'll be interesting. But again, you already have a sick athlete you could potentially use as a coverage guy, specifically as a tight end specialist in Malcolm Rodriguez, though he is a little small for that type of role. But anyways, I digress. On to the Buffalo Bills. I'm still a believer in Garrett Williams. And this is a spot here where the Bills, you just took a running back in the second round, pretty much in this spot last season. It's a complete roster. You're just kind of adding these complementary pieces, or in this spot, adding depth, right? Like if Tre'Davious White gets hurt again, or Kyler Elam goes down, or any of the guys. We've seen that unit banged up all year long, and I'm tired of hammering safety here to the Bills, so I'm trying to change it up a little bit. Garrett Williams gets to stay in state, and I think year over year has taken some steps forward. Maybe he hasn't had the huge sleep this year for Syracuse, but back in the second round, I'm intrigued by his athletic profile, and I think he'll check enough boxes to make him a day 2 type of candidate. And again, you're just adding depth. What could keep the Bills from winning a Super Bowl in the next 5 years? Injuries in the secondary is definitely one of those causes, so let's go ahead and try to get out in front of that. And then the last pick of this mock draft, Eagles fans, if you thought I was going to let you get off without drafting a running back, you are mistaken. I do like Sean Tucker, but Jahmyr Gibbs was my preseason number 2 running back for good reason. I said if there's anybody who was going to get drafted ahead of Bijan Robinson, which I don't think is going to happen, it'd be Jahmyr Gibbs. And partially because I think he's a fantastic runner. Wake Forest, he was trying to put the team on his back, and every run he felt like you could see him running, trying to hit a home run. Now at Alabama, it's like, hey, dude, you're even in a down year. That Alabama offensive line is towards the top of the country, even if it is a down year for Bama. Compare that to an offensive line from, a lot of other Power 5s, but especially mid-majors, right? But just compare it to what he had at Georgia Tech, right? Night and day. And then also his pass capability, a huge part of his, potential draft stock. And you look at, a Philadelphia team that, has utilized a Boston Scott, Miles Sanders, and crew as pass catchers. And again, speaking of those two in specific, they're going to be free agents. So let's go ahead and get a little bit cheaper there and draft a rookie running back, have him control over him for the next 4 years, and have him at a pretty decent price as well. But that is going to do it for my 2-round NFL mock draft. I'm going to move myself over, and we'll go ahead, showcase the draft one final time. But I'd love to hear your thoughts down below in the comment section. Where do you think I'm right? Where do you think I'm wrong? Who's your favorite team? Do you like the fit? Or do you think I'm out of my mind? There's no wrong answers down below. It's a conversation to be had in the comment section. So let me hear your thoughts in the said comment section. But hopefully you all enjoyed today's video. If you did, be sure to hit that like button. It seriously would help me and my channel out a ton. If you're around here, want to see more mock drafts, more football content in general, just hit that big red subscribe button. But That's going to do it for me. Hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day. And until next time, my name is Tej. I'm signing off.